Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recap episode of Flow Over Fear. And today I want to talk about the interview that I just had with Danny Bader. Danny is an amazing speaker. I had the opportunity to see him speak not long ago at an event that we were both speaking at. And his story blew me away. It was an incredible story, and he's an incredible storyteller. And if you want to listen to his story, from his own mouth, listen to this episode because he tells it in a very, very profound way. And he talks about a lot of the lessons that he learned through his life and through his death. That's right, through his death. Danny, about 30 years ago, Danny died. Danny was on the roof of a construction site when he was electrocuted with 7,000 to 8,000 volts of electricity. He and his friend were both hit by that electricity. His friend died permanently. Danny died temporarily. He spent the next 6 to 8 minutes dead. But during that time, he saw what was happening around him. He saw his one of his friends performing CPR on his other friend who had been hit. He was... And during that time, he experienced what he would call an immense calm and peace. It's a calm and peace that we hear a lot about in these near-death experiences. And it's a calm and peace that I've heard before on this very show in episode 2 when I talked to Mike Ergo, who had a near-death experience where he didn't actually die, but he was on the verge of death in a gunfight in Fallujah. And that it's a common theme that comes up during these is that there is this calm, this peace, this immense amount of love that you feel when you're in that experience. And regardless of what we think that is, or what is going on, what spiritual connection is happening there, or what chemical connection, or what it may be, the fact of the matter is that experience changes lives. It changes the lives of those that experience it. And it also changes our perspective on what living is like and what life is all about and the beauty of life. A lot of times those near-death experiences can show us what the beauty of life actually is. For what it did for Danny is that it showed him that this beautiful life is not guaranteed, and to live every day in the greatest amount of love that we can live. Some of the lessons that we learned, and I was very, very curious during this episode because there's a lot I wanted to know, a lot I wanted to unpack. And so I asked a lot of questions regarding what it was like when that happened, what it was like for Danny before the event, what it was like after, what he had to go through. And he told me that during this experience, he didn't feel any pain, that he didn't feel any sadness or loss. He just felt this great amount of love and this energy that really, really makes us go, as he says. It's a divine energy, and that divine energy is love. Danny describes it as the best and the greatest energy that we have. And he's made that his life's mission, is to lead with love. And he challenges us all to do the same, is that when we're leading with love, we are, we're really transcending the thoughts and the anxiety and the fears and everything that's going on up here in our heads, and we're leading with love. We're able to live our best life. We're able to have a spiritual connection with the God, with our higher power. And this isn't about religion or anything like that, or anything like that. For Danny and myself, for me personally, I look at spirituality as a very deep and personal thing, but faith comes up a lot in this show because faith has a lot to do with fear. Faith is especially when it comes to the things that we don't know or that we don't understand. The things that really scare us are the unknowns. And faith plays a major role in rising above that, is having the faith in, not just ourselves, but a higher power. I learned that through sobriety, that I needed a higher power to help me overcome that. And this isn't a religious thing. This isn't a church thing. This isn't anything like that. I believe in God because I believe that we are spiritually guided. For Danny, it was he believed that God is everywhere, that God is in all of us. I believe the same. And I believe that God comes out and we develop that spiritual connection through service-based love, through the love we have for others and being able to serve others in the best way that we know how. It's one of the topics that we got into during this interview is what does service mean? And service means living with love, is being guided by that. Being more curious, instead of getting into our own heads, we can get more curious and be more open-minded to what people's souls are rather than their outside appearance, or rather than how they might be presenting themselves in a moment. We use the example of being in a restaurant where the server might be having a bad night. There's two scenarios in that where they may be acting, ignoring or getting angry at the customers just because they're so busy, or where they're really apologetic or anything like that. But those outside appearances don't reflect the soul of the person. And God is in all of us. Through his experience in this near-death experience, Danny has created what he calls the jackrabbit principles, or what he's going forward calling the back to life principles. Those back to life principles include 5 elements, which are vision, be still, know thyself, seek support and give support, and evolve. And that first part is one of the most important parts that he talks about, which is the vision component. Vision, as he says, is one of the most important elements that we can have in our lives. And vision, he says, saved his life, because after his accident, Danny was in a state of despair. He was sad. He was depressed because he had this guilt of, why did he live and his friend die? His friend was 36. He had 2 kids. He had a family. And so there was guilt around that. And Danny got so depressed to the point where he nearly took his own life again. But in that situation, when he was walking into the hardware store to buy a hose that he could stick in his tailpipe that would go into his front of his car window so that he could end his own life, an 80-year-old woman came up to him, smiled, and said something, and it changed his mind to the point where instead of going out to the beach and doing what he thought he would do, he instead went and got drunk, which is what a lot of us might do in that situation, right? And then he got into a phone booth and he called his mom, and his mom said, when are you coming home? We can't wait to see you. And when that happened, that was what Danny called his rock bottom, which led him down the path of healing, of wanting to get better, of exploring how to lean into love and find that. And what he found was that there are 3 things that could help him heal and help him to grow through that experience. The first was focusing, more of his attention on love of his community, and focusing on faith and finding that vision. And that vision part was that first part that saved his life, because he was able to look into the future and see what he wanted his life to look like. And one of the powerful takeaways that he gave was a tool that we could use to visualize what our future looks like. Because for a lot of us who live in anxiety and fear, if you're anything like me, when we live in the future, it's not a great place. we tend to put our minds in the future and say, oh man, what if this happens? Oh man, I should do this, or oh, I've got this thing to do, or what am I going to do? We tend to look at the things we have in the future that from the perspective of where we're at now. So we're looking at it from a standpoint of scarcity, from a standpoint of lack of abundance, because we're looking into the future from that emptiness of what we have now, saying what we don't have when we're there. But when we visualize ourselves in the future at some specific point, maybe a year into the future, and we picture our life of where we want to be, and we look back, that's the perspective of abundance. Because now we're looking at a future point in time of what we want to achieve. That's the visualization tool. It's mentally rehearsing, as Danny would say, to look back on our lives now and at the life that we, from a perspective of the life that we want. And that because our brain, as Danny says, is wired for completion. We want things to be done. Where we're looking at it from our standpoint now, looking forward, future tripping, as we call it, there's no state of completion. That's where fear and anxiety live. But when we visualize ourselves in the future state we want to be at, a completed state, what are the smells? What are the tastes? What are the sounds we're hearing in those moments? That's where we're able to visualize and have that vision come to life. And from that's where we can find a life where we're truly living, or we're truly fully alive, as Danny says, not just living, where we're fully alive, not just living. And in that state, I asked Danny, what does it look like to be fully alive? And he said that in that state of being fully alive, there's two things. We're fulfilled. We have fulfillment, which means we're focusing on, and we're getting what we want. And we're resilient. So we're practicing resilience. And those two things are really important because they allow us to, well, when you're fulfilled, you are satisfied. You're getting what you want. You're at peace. And when you're resilient, you're practicing that continuous growth. You're pushing right up against the edges of your comfort zone, which means that you're growing. So growth and fulfillment are two important elements of being fully alive. And I would say that if you could sum up all of this episode into one word, one 4-letter word, it's love. It's leading with love. Remember, that's the greatest energy that we have. I ask for anybody that's experiencing grief that maybe here while a loved one has passed away. I'd asked him, what would they say to somebody, and his response to that was that they're okay. That he's been in that experience, and for many, many people that have experienced being near death, they've experienced that peace, that love, and while it's not a permanent state that we want, obviously, we all, and Danny has portrayed this, and everybody that I've talked to who's had an experience of near death that was peaceful and calm and full of love, they all say that exists here, and that they wouldn't trade their life for anything. That they still fight for their life because this life and this world is beautiful, because we can experience heaven on earth. We all have that in us. And as Danny said, there's a fine line between here and there. And we can make that heaven exist here if we can bring the love of heaven to this world. We can bring that here. Lead with love. Lead with love first. Lead with service first. In the best ways that you know how. And you could bring heaven to earth. So if you can, please listen to this episode with Danny Bader. His story is incredible. He's an author. You can find him at dannybader.com, and you can find his books there. Check him out and read his books. Listen to his podcast, Back to Life. And thank you for joining me today. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.